fluctuating levels of terrorist, I want to say terrorist, but I guess it's really tariffs. Hey friend, my name is Carolyn Clausen from the Loneliness Course, and I have been a therapist for about a quarter century in private practice. I work a lot with people around trauma, and I wanted to talk as a Canadian therapist who is being impacted by our American cousins to the south, particularly one person there who has fluctuating levels of terrorist, I want to say terrorist, but I guess it's really tariffs, but it feels like a form of terrorism. The fluctuating levels of tariffs, and talk about how the way the uncertainty that is created by the tariff threats creates an instability in our lives that is really difficult for us all, but is particularly difficult for people that struggle with trauma. We know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 guys have struggled with experiences of intrusive abuse, often unwanted touch. There's 2 things about trauma that I want you to know. One is that trauma, when you've had somebody violate you, it's frightening. It creates a lack of safety, and that matters. But what really matters is after the trauma, to determine whether it is stored in your body as trauma. And that is there a loving, caring person who you could talk to and that understood how frightening it was for you, how unacceptable, awful the trauma was, and be able to name it as wrong and then give you the support you need to be able to move through it. When kids who've had experiences of intrusive touch have somebody that hears them, takes it seriously, calls the police, calls Child and Family Services, makes sure you're safe, gets you the therapy you need, checks in on you because it's important, and they really get it. Those kids have had traumatic things happen to them, but it often isn't stored in their body as trauma that gets sort of reignited in the years after. It's when there was a lack of somebody that cared. Maybe they rolled their eyes, said it didn't really happen, they're remembering it wrong, they're telling stories, it wasn't that bad, or shut up buttercup, or suck it up buttercup. When they send that person away and say, I'm not going to get you the care you need because I don't believe you or it doesn't matter, those kids struggle because they aren't allowed to get the support to work through the trauma and finish the feeling and receive the support. We know that trauma heals when we have loving, caring people around us. All of that to say is that there is one person in the United States that is threatening tariffs. There are people that are saying it needs to happen because the trade agreement was terrible. The trade agreement with Canada was signed by the man himself. He set this agreement up and he declared it the best agreement ever. The one that said this was a good agreement and signed it is now saying it's a terrible agreement and not ever acknowledging that he was the one that set the agreement. That feels like gaslighting. He says the problem he's addressing is the fentanyl problem at the border. We were doing well at the border, and then when he said we needed to do better, we took it seriously and dropped the already very low number by 97%. So less than half an ounce in 2025 has crossed the border. And that apparently is enough to disrupt our livelihoods for many people. It doesn't make sense. It feels dishonest. And what is particularly troubling is that the people who are around him don't acknowledge that it's not honest and that it's weird. There are a lot of people, probably out of their own fear, that support him and say what he's doing makes sense. And so I think for many of us, that's the troubling part. You can have one person that is being harsh and unfair, dishonest, but when the people around say that's not okay, it feels better when the people around him say, it's not a big deal, you're reading it wrong, you don't understand, he has every right to do this to you because of what you've done. That part feels really traumatizing. And so just about every client in my practice these days brings it up in session. Not everybody, but most people do. And there are some for whom it's deeply traumatizing because it's re-triggering their trauma. Something bad is happening to them, and the people around him are saying it's not a problem. It makes sense. Some news agencies are minimizing the impact, are justifying it, rationalizing it in ways that don't make sense. And that is the part that feels really traumatizing. Fortunately, Canadians are supporting each other, and we are saying this isn't fair, and we're telling each other that. We like being Canada. We like you Americans, but we don't want to be you. We want to just be neighbors with you. You can understand that. Why you would want to be neighbors with somebody, but not actually want to live in their house? One person, and I share this with permission, quoted a line from The Green Mile where John Coffey is on death row, and he has a chance to say to the character played by Tom Hanks that he is as lonely as a sparrow in the rain. That sounds really poignant. He paints a really plaintive picture. And then he goes on.
Mostly I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. I'm tired of all the pain I feel and hear in the world every day. There's too much of it. It's like pieces of glass in my head all the time.
Mostly I'm tired of people being ugly to each other, he says. And aren't we all tired of people being ugly to each other? Can you imagine your mind having a pane of glass, a beautiful pane of glass, but every traumatic experience is like a crack, weakening its integrity? And when current events echo these past traumas, as if someone is tapping on that already fragile, cracked glass, threatening to shatter it completely. And for some people, it is. And that pain is fresh and real, and it's almost intolerable. These feelings are valid. If you're getting triggered by what's happening, if your trauma feels like it's becoming alive and you're experiencing it right now, and you're losing sleep and you're anxious and you're irritable, and it feels like he's right around the corner, you're not overreacting or being overly sensitive. Your mind is responding to familiar patterns, trying to protect you from harm. The next line that John Coffey finishes as he's talking to the character played by Tom Hanks is he says, "Do you understand?" And I think that's really powerful because we all want to be understood. We need to be understood. And so I think we need to take time when we don't get to make the big decisions, that we at least take time to see each other and understand how hard this is on each other, where you listen to another person all the way to the bottom of their feelings as they talk about how this tariff trauma is really hard.